Well, it's getting to the end of the year, everybody. This is Operators episode number 88. We are talking about end of year planning and how we're thinking about growing as we head into 2025. We're so thankful for our sponsors, Fulfill, Northbeam, and Postscript. They make this show possible, and they have been tremendous partners. We always try to be really upfront that they are sponsors that help make this podcast happen. But the reason why we're happy to have them as sponsors is because we personally use them, and our businesses have benefited from partnering with them. So without further ado, here's the show.
The venture-backed D2C SaaS landscape has created a bit of a problematic ecosystem. See, the companies are building to sell rather than building to serve. And most founders are aiming for a Shopify acquisition, prioritizing flashy features over reliability. See, for the established D2C operators, people like myself, Mike, Sean, Jason, there's so many of us, the priorities are very simple. It just needs to work. Right? What matters is just dependability. How companies respond to issues when they arise, their service levels. It's how teams respond. It's how, do they drop everything when there's a customer issue? Do founders get their hands dirty? These things matter because this is the life that we live. Now, especially at large scale, these kinds of brands, these large, big brands, they need software like Fulfill. They need things that are reliable, efficient, and things that support their growth and support them one-on-one. And the funny thing is, Shopify does this. You see this from Toby and Harley and their whole team. All they focus on is building and serving, and they've been doing it a long time, and look where it's got them. See, a lot of Shopify apps, these D2C SaaS, I don't know what to call them, the D2C SaaS ecosystem, they should take notice of this. I know Fulfill has. I've spent a lot of time with that team. We like them for all of these reasons. There's more than 50 of them now at that company. And I know that they're very, very grateful for everyone who's been listening to the show because they've had tons of people reach out to them for help. And even if you don't wind up working with these guys, they are amazing. You should at least talk to them and get their view on things. Okay, back to the show. Let's get into it.
Canada doesn't believe in collars. We cut out collars.
No, not a single collar. I have 2 shirts with a collar in my closet. And they mostly
what's weird about the shirts with collar thing? We had a couple. We had our first board meeting because we never really had a board. But after Fox, we've got a board member.
Yeah.
And our board member, he's awesome. He's so good. So we it's just like we're hanging out. But I show up to the HexClad office/warehouse in a collared dress shirt, and everyone is like, "Wow, what do you
look like you have a job?
What are you dressed up for?" I'm like, are you kidding me? I used to wear a suit and tie to work every day. You guys have no idea how lucky you are. And but honestly, it really does. It makes a difference when you dress like a pro in the office. People they get it. So advice to everyone. And I said this on a pod this summer. Your appearance matters, and you should look good in the office. I mean, I need a haircut and a shave. I'm going this afternoon, but cut your hair, trim your beard, and wear something decent. If you're, I'm not going to give any.
I got a line for you on this, Jason.
Yeah.
Act as if.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen the movie Boiler Room?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Ben Affleck has a great 90-second speech, which is just act as if. And it's basically exactly act as if you belong there. Act as if you're the guy in the room that has his stuff the most together. Act with confidence. It's funny. I heard a story a guy told one time that was the ultimate of this. He was at a conference and had a meeting in a room. He was running a little bit late. He walks in the room. Table's full. He goes and he gets the last remaining seat. He realizes 5 minutes into the meeting, he was some kind of mid-level, guy at his corporation. He realizes this is literally just a meeting for CEOs, that he is in completely the wrong room, does not belong there at all. But you know what? Instead of getting up and leaving, he just acts like he belongs there. He asks a couple questions. He engages.
That's amazing.
It was the ultimate act as if that we assume that people will know. They'll be like, oh, you're an imposter. You don't belong here. You whatever. But it's if you really just act the part so often, that's half the battle.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree, Jason, with your whole like just take care of yourself, and you don't need to dress up, but just don't be a bum. Like I that's sort of my thing. Like I joke with not having a collar, but I don't dress like a bum. Like that's Jason's repping his homeless look right now. Like I try to not do that as much as possible. That's
Do you guys
the goal.
subscribe to you can never overdress?
I'm on the you guys. I have a tea time in an hour and a half, so we need to get this pod going.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Just so everybody knows, basically at this point, all pod scheduling is built around Jason's golf schedule. So if you're ever like, why are they recording it this really random, why are they doing it at 5 a.m. on a Saturday? And the answer is tea times, guys. Tea times.
They're really important.
It creates space for me to focus on work. And so I think this is our last pod that's going to be released in 2024, right, Matt? And so we were going to do a little. So first of all, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate. It's been a great
Kwanzaa.
It's been great, dude. Matt, listen, Kwanzaa's big now. Okay, we shot Kwanzaa content. It's look it up.
He didn't say Happy Festivus. I apologize in advance for all the groups that Jason did not cover with his disclaimer.
I tried to hit them all, but Matt, you proposed that we do some year-end recap stuff and 2025 planning. So why don't you
look, man,
it's the track here.
We're recording on Friday, December 20th. So by the time this comes out, it's probably the day after Christmas. Do you guys call it Boxing Day too? We call it Boxing Day, the day after Christmas.
Excuse me, what was that?
We don't call it Boxing Day, but
what do you call it?
It's Canadian. It's in Canada and UK, right? It's big, and shout out Boxing Day in the UK because it's a good sale day for us.
It's a really good sale day.
Kicking ass in the UK, so we love us some Boxing Day. So you guys are British Commonwealth. So you follow.
We are. We're an extension.
Boxing Day has not made it to Oklahoma, guys. I don't even know what that means.
Mike is so worldly, yet he's so Oklahoma at the same time.
Right, man.
I'm here for it.
It's crazy.
I'm a great blend of cosmopolitan ignorance, guys.
I love it. I'm so here for it. What what I was thinking for today, guys, is number one, I want to know what your next 2 weeks looks like. I mean, Jason, I know you're golfing, so maybe this is more a question for Mike. Jason's golfing, but like from now until
2 weeks. But Matt, like for the last couple of weeks, we've been just slammed.
Yeah.
We had all of our people from around the world come to LA, and we flew everyone in from Australia, China, Japan, UK, Europe. Everyone came in. It was a really intense 2 weeks. And at the same time, and we'll get to this a little bit later because I know it's on your list, Matt, but like doing budgeting and planning and doing year-end comp, because we pay bonuses at the end of the year to almost everyone, even though actually I think we need to move this to end of January next year because we have to see how the year really fills out. And it's just too much. But we've had a really intense couple of weeks. So between having everyone in, doing year-end comp, and then doing budgeting for next year, like I'm ready to just check out starting today. I mean, I'm checked out. I'm gonna be like keeping
I'm barely forming sentences.
I'm gonna there's like the few senior people, the C-suite, and the growth team, and we'll just be checking in. But it's like between now and the 2nd of January, it's like 2 hours a day of staying on top of stuff. And Hexlet has this thing called, I've never heard of this until this year. This is how we're getting really corporate now. Soft hours. Anyone know what the hell soft hours is?
I don't know what this is.
Thank you. I'm glad you don't know what it is. I have faith in humanity. I don't know. Just this concept of soft hours, and I don't know what it means, but it's in everyone's calendar, and it has something. I guess it's like you don't really have to work, or you're not in the office, but you gotta maybe I'm doing soft hours, which is just checking in for a couple hours. I don't know, but that's what's going on.
Very cool, Mike. What about you, man? What do the next 2 weeks look like for you guys?
Yeah, so for us, it's all about setting up what'll happen basically like January 7th and 8th. So we start our kind of annual planning process pretty early, like September. And this year it's been kind of a multi-month process. When we kind of go into the break period here, the senior leadership will all be working together on a couple presentations. The first one is kind of like Simple Modern 2024 Wrapped. Like if you think of like the Spotify idea, it's like us basically summarizing, hey, what happened in 24? What do we focus on? How did it go? Where are we positioned? Some of it's just bringing everybody up to speed with where we are and where our heads at as we started thinking about the strategic planning. And then on the 8th, I'll give about an hour and a half presentation. That's our strategic goals for 25.
Mm.
And then we'll directly go into breakouts with our departments, where our departments start putting together their roadmaps based on the overall corporate OKRs. And those are led by people that are in the senior leadership meeting. So they know what's coming. They've been thinking about it. So that hopefully by the end of the 8th, or certainly by the end of that week, everybody in the organization understands really clearly where we positioned, what's going well, what's not going well, where do we want to go, what is my department's role in that, what's my part in that, what would make this year a success, and then we're able to be off to the races.
Are you guys, Jason, I know you are, your fiscal is calendar lined up. Mike, is your fiscal calendar as well? Why, I got a question. Why do you wait so long in the year? Like, why do the planning at the very end of the year? Why not? Like, so we're like Jason, we did our kind of like 2025 planning, I want to say like a week and a bit ago. Right. So like we get it all done. And then from now until like annual kickoff in January, about the same time as you, we have time to like collect our thoughts and all that stuff. What's the,
So I don't know that it's necessarily the right time. There's a couple of reasons behind it. I think one is that practically just people's mentality, they just tend to think new year, new
yeah,
focus, like I just think it fits with that. I think the other piece is that our calendar, this is something I learned actually back when I worked in the nonprofit world, this idea that your year will have cycles of momentum
mm,
and these kind of peaks and valleys. And that, like Jason said, Jason's about to go in from a real peak to like a valley. Like you kind of have to have that where
yeah,
you have it swings up and down. And Chinese New Year is coming. So there is a period where you can't really do anything when it comes to production. And so it makes sense. In our mind, it made sense that you're kind of setting everybody up and they're doing a lot of their planning and then getting their ducks in a row during a period where you can't operationally, tactically execute as much.
mm,
So, like, one of the things that I've definitely seen is part of what you're fighting against with the calendar is you're fighting against the clumpiness of business, where there's these periods where you could be working on 8 things, and then there's other periods where it's like, what do I work on? And that part of leading your team well is you're trying to kind of spread out the work that needs to be done across the year so that every point in the year, your team has things it can be intentionally working on. And so for us, at least, this seems to make the most sense that we're setting our teams up to do a lot of their internal planning and their strategic thinking when they can't be operationally executing, so that when you come out of Chinese New Year, like we really clearly know where we're going and we're hitting the ground running.
yeah. It's, I mean, I get this question a lot. Like people message me, even coming into this episode, right? Annual planning and how do you guys like act? Like, what's the rhythm look like? Who's involved? Like, if you're going to go through the budgeting process, who's doing that in your companies at this scale, right? I'd be actually curious, Jason. So like you guys had everybody in for 2 weeks building
Yeah.
out forecasts for next year. What does that look like? Like you're very in the weeds on that, on numbers.
Yeah.
How is it like a top down, like, hey guys, this is the goal, or
Yeah.
is it bottoms up? This is the data.
Yeah. It's actually it's interesting, and you have to tackle it from both directions, top down and bottom up. And we've gotten so big now, we actually hired over 80 new people in 2024 at Hexclad.
How big's your total team, Jason?
It's about 200.
Is that including Roadshow?
Yes.
That's actually like really impressive. What's your HQ team? Like like HQ being like
HQ, like in office employees are in the 45-ish neighborhood.
yeah.
And then we have, probably 30, 35 hybrids or remote
Yep.
people because they just don't happen to be, we have a little office in Denver for the growth team. And yeah, so we've added a ton of people this year. And our business, like many of the businesses that listen to this pod, is very Q4 heavy. And so, and add on top of that we've just been this rocket ship for years and years now. Like this is the first year that we at least have, like, we can start actually predicting growth, right? It's like,
Mhm.
because got so big last year, that this year it's like there's no way we were going to double this year. Like the math just doesn't work. Laws of physics cannot be
Yeah. Laws
defied.
of big numbers. They catch you.
Yeah. So we still grew really, really nicely, but we're at least now able to, like, okay, we don't have to be in a position where we don't know if we're going to double or grow 70% or grow 150%. Like, and it's kind of a shame that we don't have that anymore, obviously, but that's just life and business. And so, all that said, like we were hardly able to budget in the past. It was like it almost didn't matter because we were growing so fast and the numbers were just going to be wrong. And fortunately for us, profitability was never an issue. Cash flow can be an issue, and there have been times because we're just buying so much inventory, got to pay taxes. We talked about all that stuff. This year, with the combination of more reasonable growth and maturity of our business and financing, we cleaned up a lot of things this year. And so we started back in September working on next year budgets, but still, because so much of our business is in November and December, it's, when do you start? So we had like a slow roll, and then in the last month we've been going hard. And to your point about, how do you forecast? I'm looking at last year's growth rate, and then I'm saying, okay, what is a growth rate that is acceptable to us as a management team? And what do we have to do at a country by country and channel by channel
There you
level
go. Yeah.
to hit those numbers? I just, like, to me, there's really no better way. And so we'll go out to every country leader and every channel leader and be like, okay, what do you think you could do? And then we put that into our overall growth target for the year.
Yep.
And sort of like triangulate and work with these teams. One team might have more aggressive goals in their mind than we need them to have. Another team might have less aggressive goals, and they need to step it up and not be wimps. And like that's sort of how we do it. And then the biggest expenses for us, cogs are cogs. Like those are pretty good. Like we know what those are going to be because we've been working with this situation for a while. So there's cogs, and then there's fulfillment costs, which is a big number for us. And we recently totally rebooted our entire fulfillment network with a huge new 3PL. And that was our team's like, yeah, we'll do that in September, right before Q4. I'm like, yeah, great idea, guys.
What
And
could go wrong?
Yeah.
yeah.
There's no risk there, Jason. It's
Yeah.
totally fine.
I know. They actually pulled it off because I basically said, you're betting your job here, right? I mean, I was joking, but they pulled it
But
off.
not really.
It came out great. Our ops team, our COO Niles, our ops team, Brian, like they just absolutely crushed it. And but fulfillment costs are really interesting because, like, we had our own warehouse for a long time and we still do. But the minute you max out that warehouse, all of a sudden your margins drop because it's sort of like there's operating leverage in
Yeah.
filling up that warehouse. And essentially, the marginal cost until the warehouse is full, the marginal cost of the next order is nothing, right?
Yeah.
Until you fill up the warehouse and you're like, shoot, I need to go get new space. I need to get more people. I need to run all this, right? And so we went through that this year, and our fulfillment costs went up this year as a function of our incredible growth over the last 2 years. So now with the new 3PL and all the planning that we've done, we're going to see those margins improve, which is great. And then the third bit is marketing. And that's, I think marketing expense is the hardest and we're heavy users of Northbeam. We're heavy users of MMM. We're doing a lot of other things with data analytics and data warehouse and data science to try to figure this stuff but like I continue to think that we spend too much on Meta, but I've still yet to win that fight with everyone. So those are the levers. That's where it's all there, right? We've got content costs, we've got certain brand awareness stuff that we do, but those are like really kind of down in the noise. You got to get those big two, the fulfillment costs and the marketing expenses done right to support the growth levels that you're trying to get to. So there's my feedback on that one.
Yeah, it's for us very similar. Like we go very bottoms up now. We have enough history, especially in Pila Case, that it's like we can just go right down to traffic. It's like straight up. It's like, where's the traffic coming from? What's the mix? How much is direct, organic, paid through what channel? And then we just have models that we build up to revenue targets, right? And so it's like, I used to be very top down. What growth rate do we think we can sustain? Again, market by market, channel by channel. And lately we've been very bottoms up, which is like, what do we believe to be true and possible reasonably? And then do we like what we see? If not, where do we think we have to change or push or invest? But I quite like the bottoms up approach. Like it just, I don't know about you guys. I just like looking at all the numbers at a ridiculously low level detail. It gives me much more confidence in what can be done.
Well, one of the things that we've been wrestling with a lot with our team, Jason, I'm sure this is true of you, Matt, same with you, is that once you get to a certain scale, you realize to meaningfully move the business means something has to generate, basically tens of millions of dollars.
Yes.
And that cannot happen without a tremendous amount of deterministic planning. So put it another way, like if we think a product line, can produce $10 million, $15 million in growth, you got to buy for that. You're going to have to buy whatever, $5 million more of inventory or something. And so it really does start to become, what are the places in my business that can drive growth, where I'm willing to make very big bets from my capital structure and from my planning side to be able to set myself up to have the possibility of putting up this growth. Because at our scale, you really can't say, oh, this thing's going really well in May and translate it into fiscal results for this year, right? It's just, it doesn't work that way. The numbers are too big. You have to kind of be able to stand over your business and do it more deterministically and do it further out. This is one of the things that I've said about new product launches, that no new product launch has the ability to be meaningful to our business in year one, which has been good to know that, because I think it's helping us to break some of our bad habits. But anyway, the bottoms up approach, what it does is it kind of nests with planning, I think, a lot more naturally, because ultimately, whatever your growth goal is, has to lead to planning and buying goals, because otherwise your growth goals are completely unrealistic. Like at the end of the day, it's going to come down to, if we're going to hit this growth goal, it's going to be sold, X amount more of this SKU and this SKU and that SKU. And you have to get pretty specific, or it's just hope, which is not a strategy.
We absolutely use Northbeam, and me specifically, every day. I'm constantly in there building out reports. And I remember when we brought it on a couple years ago, and I got to meet Austin, who is the founder, and he is fabulous. And he was selling me on the idea of, not using in-platform and really using a separate platform as like our source of truth, which is what we needed. And I mean, it has been a deal breaker for us. It's helped us scale in areas and on platforms that we didn't even, weren't getting a good read on. And it's helped us optimize for our channels that we really had a lot of high spend on. And their team is great. My favorite part is taking the calls with them where they, dive deep into the insights, and they've always got really great information for us. So yeah, I love Northbeam. We wouldn't be where we're at today without them.
So that bottom up, like by SKU work definitely needs to happen, which is why I said it's top down and bottom up, because like we're gonna solve that issue, the bottom up issue, by starting with top down and kind of backing into it. And by the way, it's never right. Like we ran out of certain things that we did not think we would run out of in Q4. It was really like what was nice is we put a lot of focus into non-cookware products over the last year, just to kind of expand that. And our knives and our pepper mills, which are both awesome, but everyone knows us for the Hexclad pan, and we way outperformed that. And part of it was due to the offer. Part of it was like, I look back and what we ran when November 15th started, and I look at how we priced certain things. I'm like, we priced them too low. The offer was too good. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. It's still we still priced it high enough, like that we would never price lower.
Yeah.
We have very strict gross margin requirements, right? Like in everything we do. So, but we sold them out. So even with this really great planning, Mike, by SKU, it's going to be wrong.
That's right.
It's frustrating, but it's going to be wrong.
It's going to be wrong. I mean, basically running an inventory-based company is the adventure of half of your job is managing the places where you're wrong and you have too much, and the other half is managing the parts where you're wrong and you have too little. It's like, and so that just kind of comes with the territory. But one of the thoughts that I think we've realized as we're continuing to grow and dealing with these problems of scale, and I think you're probably dealing with this also, Jason, in some of your forecasting. I'd be curious how you're approaching this. Is you start asking questions of, okay, when we're wrong, and we're going to be wrong, where are we willing to sacrifice? And usually it's, are you willing to sacrifice on share? Are you willing to sacrifice on your turns? Are you willing to sacrifice on your margins? And so I'd be curious, like this is one that really comes back to, I think, how your ownership structure of your organization looks, what the goals of your organization are. So I'll give a really practical example. I would say our business has, let's call it 4 main verticals that we sell right now. 3 of the 4, we're crushing it. And 1, I think we're getting beat. We're kind of bleeding. So one of my big strategic things for this next year is it's like, we are going to turn around this area where we're getting beat. Because if we can turn that around, it's actually pretty easy to get to a good growth number. But if we keep losing share here, like it's going to be a massive problem. It can sink the ship. And so the kind of the question that my team has kind of put before me is like, okay, how important is share to you here? How does that tie in with our desire on capital efficiency with turns? And how does that tie in with margins? And in our particular case, I'm like, share is even more important than margins to me in this particular category, because for the first time ever, we lost share in that category. And I don't think that can continue. But I'm also not, considering selling the company, considering going public, anything like that. So I don't have to particularly worry about the margins piece. Really, the person that it impacts me as a shareholder financially, but it doesn't really impact anything about the external of the company. Jason, with you guys, how do you think about the balance between those things as you're setting out to do your planning for next year?
Great question.
Like the balance of what margin?
Margin, share, and inventory turns. Like,
Yeah.
What are you prioritizing when you're wrong? Like you said, when you're wrong on a SKU or a product line, you basically end up either having to say, I'm just willing to hold it longer and be heavy for a while, or I'm willing to get aggressive on price to move it and keep my turns good and to get my share growing.
Yeah.
And how are you guys thinking about that balance?
Yeah, it's evolving. The nice thing is we're not like as fashion focused as maybe Simple Modern is a little bit, and even with Ridge, with the NFL teams and all the licensing that you both do, we're pretty plain vanilla that way. We just actually, it's interesting because we sold 10x our forecast in the UK in the first 2 days of the BFCM sale, which started before BFCM. We literally sold everything. I mean, it was crazy. And we had done a ton of good marketing in the UK, a lot of good brand awareness, stuff like that. But my point on this one is I just told everyone for next year, we just need to way over order there. It's just not gonna hurt our business to hold more inventory. And like Sean talks about how he'll have like a year of inventory in some SKUs. And of course, wallets are a lot smaller than cookware sets. So he can do that more than we can. But at least in some of these like faster growing new territories, which are still like under 15% of our business in total, we're just going to overinvest in inventory there. And then we know there are certain like basic, the building blocks of our business are our basic cookware sets, our base cookware sets. So we'll just over order that. And then we'll just know like on the margins, we might screw up on knives. We might screw up on this specialty piece. We might screw up on, but due to the concentration of our business in certain basic SKUs, which is also something we're trying to change over time. It's not as hard for us. You guys, we do a lot of work on demand planning. We during our year-end meeting, someone did an AI like rendering of the number of containers that we ordered in 2024. And I got to get this thing from them. It was crazy. It was like an entire port full of containers. I don't know how many we did, whether it was 1,500 or 2,000, or it was certainly north of 1,000 40-foot containers. And like there's a lot going on in the demand planning, and it's only going to get worse. And we've really beefed up like our finance, accounting, and ops teams. We've beefed them up substantially this year, to be ready going forward.
Can I want to poke a little bit on this share thing, because this is a really cool topic. We've not gone after this yet on the pod. Mike, so I got a bunch of questions. Like, where do you get your data for category share? So like, what share of the category in each of these categories that you're in? And then, maybe after that, Jason, like, I would love to hear how you think about sort of like cookware and hexclads, like, the growth of the category is one element, and then how much of that category, or how much of that growth and how much of the existing share are you actually capturing? So Mike, where do you go for this data? So like, if somebody's listening to this, I want to know, where do you go?
Great. So practically, I think building out the ability to understand what's going in the larger market is something that's happened in the last 24 months with us. For a long time, we just basically looked at our numbers and we're, I don't want to say we were unconcerned, but we didn't really care what was going on with the larger market because we weren't big enough that we were completely captive to it. As you get bigger and bigger, your performance is in large part dictated by the headwinds or tailwinds that your category is experiencing and what is happening with other people. So the larger you get, the more you have to build out this competency. There are 3 or 4 main places that we go to grab data. They're with Amazon. There are some ways you can kind of scrape your way. There's some different SaaS tools to kind of estimate sales rates. But there's an organization that we use where we go and we buy aggregated data. They do it 2 different ways. One is they have a tool where the retailers will actually provide their data. And so you're getting actuals. And then they have another tool, which is kind of cool, where it's basically a surveying system where they do receipt surveying across a really large sample, and then they extrapolate that data. So that data is not actuals, and sometimes it can be a little bit less accurate, but directionally, it gives you a really good idea of what's happening. I think Circana is the name of the organization that we use, or that was its name at one point. Maybe it's something else now. And so we'll look at the Circana data and it will give you a very good picture of what's going on in certain channels. Now, places where it's not great, D2C numbers don't get reported by most people to Circana. Yeti reports their D2C numbers to Circana, or maybe it's because they're public that Circana has them. So that's really interesting. It's actually interesting, something crazy. It's like if you considered Yeti's website a channel, just like Costco or Walmart, it would be like the fifth biggest retailer in drinkware or something. Or it's pretty crazy. But so you can kind of get a feel of what's going on across all these major channels with your competitors and how that's shifting. And then I think there's some really good D2C tools out there. Many, Common Thread has a tool that you can look at. There's quite a few different scraper services out there that will give you estimates.
Yeah, Particle gets a lot of airplay.
Yep.
My team uses their product. I think there's a couple others out there like that as well.
So you're trying to kind of aggregate a lot of the different sales data. And ideally, you have multiple sources that kind of serve as check and balances on each other if one of them throws out a really screwy number. And you also start to get a real feel for the market. So sometimes you'll hear numbers where you're like, I don't think that's true. That doesn't fit in the overall concept of like what's going on in the market. But we've gone from, I would say, pretty ignorant. Like, I'll give a really good example of this. Nobody knows what Stanley did in 2023 in revenue. Like,
really?
Well, no, they don't. It's a huge breakout story. And then somebody somewhere said they did 750 million in revenue. And so everybody just kind of ran with that. And I don't know what the revenue is, but I'll tell you this, based on the numbers I'm looking at and the different things I can see, I would be really surprised if Stanley didn't sell as much drinkware as Yeti did over a 12-month period. And Yeti selling 30-something million units. And you start to do some math and you're like, I think they probably sold a lot closer to a billion or a billion, 1.25 billion. That 750 number was just kind of, somebody said it somewhere and everybody ran with it. But you start to get an idea of kind of like what's happening. Then I think, so that's share of like actual market. You also start to get a feel for what is my market doing. So in our case, you might feel really good. Like this year, I think we grew maybe 15% as a company. I don't know. I'd have to look at the numbers. But, and coming off 100% growth year, we felt pretty good about that. We felt like this was a consolidation year. But our category might have grown 17%. I don't know. We don't know the final number. And so it contextualizes your growth. If you grew 15%, but your category grew 17%, then you actually shrunk in relative in share, you shrunk. And so you shouldn't feel awesome necessarily about that 15%. Whereas if your category put up a -5 and you grew 15%, you should feel, I think, great about what's going on.
Yeah.
So it contextualizes your numbers in a way that's helpful. It also helps you to understand, especially if you're selling into mass retailers, it helps you to understand where are you vulnerable, what are the retailers likely thinking going into things. So there is a little bit of a self-perpetuating dynamic that can happen with market share that goes a little bit like this. You're gaining share, and retailers are looking at reports that say you're gaining share. And they want to show their boss that they're expanding with brands that are winning. So they give you more spaces on the shelf, which leads to you gaining even more share, which leads to you having momentum that leads to even more share. And so you can get in this positive feedback loop. And then the opposite of that is also true. Once you become a brand that's quote unquote losing share, then all of a sudden there's a lot of justification for buyers to give you less spaces on the shelf or to lean into you less, which leads to even less sell through, which leads to even less share, and it can create a negative feedback loop. So these are things that we've gotten a lot more concerned with. And then I think the other side of it is you start thinking about things like share of voice, and there's a lot of tools out there where you can start to say, hey, relative to other people, what's it looking like with Google searches? What's it looking like with Amazon searches? What's it looking like with social media mentions? And we've gotten quite a bit more analytical about that as well. And all of this matters because then you can hopefully tie those numbers to what you're doing. When we do X, this is the response and share of voice. This is the response and share of market. We want to do more of this. We want to do less of this, that kind of stuff.
All right, let's take a quick break and we're going to thank our sponsor, Postscript. Okay, here's what I want to talk about. There's been this trend in e-commerce where we're trying to get to like all-in-one solutions. So like SMS, email, everything's in one place. And I think there's a bunch of weird arguments for this. I think this is all BS. Like, I would rather have a solution that is like point built and is great for that one thing. This is why I like Postscript. This is why we use Postscript. They do SMS. They do it really freaking well. Right. And I hate to say I told you so, but a lot of brands have gone to like the all-in-one thing to try to integrate email and SMS, and they've just moved back. And they do it for a bunch of reasons. Oh, it's easier for attribution. It's easier on my marketing team to log into one place. I think that's all BS. Look, the reason we like Postscript is all they think about, they eat and breathe SMS, which means my team is constantly getting access to new features before anybody else. They're actually consulting with us and helping us get better at SMS. I think this email and SMS need to be integrated to make SMS more effective is a lie. The reality is most of us aren't sending enough email and most of us aren't sending enough SMS. So trying to like trigger one off the other is likely just a waste of time. And I don't know too many brands personally who can tell me straight faced that this has been a big benefit to them. So in my view, in my experience, like the reason we like having Postscript as a sponsor is because we use it and it works really well. And the team is great. Their support's awesome. Their pricing is awesome. So that's my shout out to Postscript. It's wicked to have them as a sponsor for the pod. Let's get back to the show. Jason, what about you guys? So like cookware is a massive category. There's some really big players. You guys are now one of them, right? How do you think about share of category? Let's just focus on the cookware business for XCloud since that's like the foundation.
I think that we're pretty juvenile in our work around that. We have a couple of people in product marketing that come from larger cookware organizations, and so it's been really good adding them to the mix and thinking about it. We think about it more in terms of new products. That's really what we care about. Because in general, I think when it comes to just cookware, like stovetop cookware, we think about it in terms of our market penetration as a percentage of the overall market size, and we feel really good about the fact that it's really a huge market. But we're also thinking about what are the next markets we want to enter,
right?
Outside of just stovetop cookware, and that requires work to think about. Does that market make sense? Is that big enough? How do we tackle that? But we've been, I'd say, rather unscientific at this point regarding really understanding share. I mean, it's also, there's not a lot of great data out there. I'm sorry. I'm big I love calling bullshit on people who think they're making these really informed decisions with data that's just like, it's really not that great. I don't really trust much of it.
No.
I probably should go spend the market research firms that want to sell you a report for $5,000 here or 25,000 there. We probably do need to invest in some of that at some point, and I'm sure that my team on the product marketing side has done a little of that and invested in some of that stuff. It hasn't really bubbled up to me, but probably there comes a time in our business where we need to do a really industry overview deep dive. It's funny because I talk to people in finance and when I tell them our numbers, they're still kind of blown away by us compared to some of the other D2C guys. I think we're at least double the size in terms of top line than any of the kind of known D2C players, like pretty much double. I think I remember at one point I felt like we could add them all up and we're bigger. I think some of them have seen some pretty solid growth, maybe because if it's a lower price point or than us or whatever. But yeah, I think we need to do that. We need to probably do a deep dive on market sizing, et cetera, as we get closer to, say, any kind of strategic transaction. Maybe it's an IPO in a couple of years, something like that. And then we'll work with people to get that information.
I think for people listening too, this is, it's a useful framing for not just comparing, like who do you compare to? Who do you compete with? I think in D2C, it's easy to look at like broad D2C and say, here's how D2C or consumer is doing, but everything is category and market specific. So like it's much more productive for Jason to be looking at like Hexclad in the context of cookware and the markets they're in than it is to say like, hey, how are we growing relative to a Ridge or a Simple Modern or, True Classic Tees, like something else, right? Like those aren't helpful comparisons. And I think that for operators, looking at how your business is doing relative to Sean's, if you don't sell wallets or luggage or rings, what are you doing? Like there's a reason why Sean or all of us say like, don't listen to us directly on anything, right? Like we're just providing, frameworks and mental models, not direct comparison. And I think this whole idea of share thing, like the guy that I hired this year to come in and grow Pillowcase into retail, since we've never been there, and it's like 90% of the market is in retail in our category. He talks a lot about share because that's the game, right? It's like, how are we going to take share? And that's been a new framing for me.
I want to say a couple things about it because, Jason, you were like, I don't believe in it. I think there's two things that are really important. The analyst in me is going to stand up and say two really important things. Number one, there's so much data. There's almost limitless data out there, and 99% of it, you can't really use it to make actionable insights and decisions in your business. Wisdom is knowing what the 1% is that can actually change how you think and change how you make decisions. Most people don't have that skill. Their dashboards are a bunch of navel-gazing, vanity things that they like to refresh and watch the numbers change. But wisdom and smart business owners are able to kind of find the signal in the midst of all the noise and say, if I focus on this one thing, it helps me understand how to make better decisions. Smart people know how to find that 1%. Are you one of the people that knows how to do that? So you're wanting to build your business in that way. And it also helps you to understand, taking this all the way back to planning. If you're expecting, like, I'll give a really practical example. There have been a couple times that we set growth goals based on, we looked backwards and we said, well, we grew 75% last year. We think we can grow 50% this year. But we weren't paying attention to how big we had gotten as share of market in that particular channel. And it was never realistic to hit the number that we were trying to hit once you considered. So like, I'll just give an example. We were growing like crazy in kids' backpacks on Amazon. But what we didn't do one year during our forward-looking planning is say, what percentage of kids' backpacks, under 7-year-old kids' backpacks do we already represent on Amazon? Instead, we just kind of threw out our goal of what we thought we could do the next year. But if you had taken that number and relativized it to the amount of kids' backpacks that Amazon was selling, you would have really quickly said, that's probably not a very good goal, because that means you're going to be at like 50% share or some,
Right.
at a really premium price point, like a number that's just not realistic. And so I think that it can be helpful in terms of sanity checking your planning of, is your planning realistic? Is it rooted in reality or not?
I like that. I think that's a really great frame. Look, we've only got about 10 minutes left because I have a hard stop today. There's a question that somebody posted on Twitter for this that I thought was really good, which is where, and I'd love to get both your perspective on this. Like, where do you think you need to grow your capacity? So like, where are your blind spots or your deficiencies? And then how do you think about either identifying them or like attacking them? Maybe Mike, you can start, and Jason, and I can chime in if we've got some time.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things I tell people about being a CEO, I'm in year 9 of being a CEO of a company that I co-founded, is that I've had the same title for the entire time. I've probably worn 7 different hats. And as your organization grows, you have to grow with it. And there become points where you're like, let's say you're doing your planning for the next year and you realize, I'll give a really tangible example right now. Early on, I have a real, let's go get sales, bias to action, make stuff happen, throw things out there, iterate, experiment. I'm really good at that stuff. I would say I'm kind of elite in those ways. The problem is, the bigger we've gotten, the more it's become obvious that we have got to focus, and that a lot of that tendency, and a lot of those skills that I have can really work against us. And that's been a big theme of this year's planning, is that for us to get where we want to get, we're going to have to do less to do more, do less to sell more. And that I'm going to have to be a disciplined and focused leader, and I'm going to have to work against some of my tendencies. And so, like, to me, that's a lot of what's revealed the blind spots, or the weak spots, or the ways that I have to grow. Is as the organization has grown, it's become obvious for us to take the next step. These things have to happen. And as a leader, am I able, am I willing, am I capable of being the type of leader that leads that type of an organization? And I think that this is why a lot of people become serial entrepreneurs, because they like one particular slice of the growth kind of process. But then you get to a certain scale and they're like, I don't want to be that type of leader. So for me, it's continuing to challenge myself of, am I willing and excited about growing and being the type of leader that's needed in every individual phase? And, next year it's going to be a really different type of leader than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But that's okay. That's what the organization needs. And I'm excited about, growing and being challenged in that way.
Jason, how do you think about this, like, for yourself? And because the scope of your role, just having known you the last few years, has changed so much. Like, are you thinking about it ahead of time, or are you just sort of like, you know what, when it goes this fast, I just need to react? Like, just give me a sense for that, because it's nuts.
Yeah. At, at the beginning of every year, I sort of set strategic objectives that I think the company should have, and I try to spend the year focusing on achieving those objectives. Maybe like a high level set, and then one level down. So like 3 to 4 really high level strategic objectives, and then kind of 6 to 10, like one level down, categories under each one. So one for marketing. Look, what if you ask any CEO of a public company and say, what are the levers of growth? They're typically going to say increase brand awareness as one of the first ones. They might say geographic expansion as another, and another, really, in a consumer brand at least, and in a lot of other companies as well, in SaaS, is product development. So like I'm going to look at those three, and then I'm going to break down each one. So under brand awareness, there's like brand side and there's growth side, and how do we. So anyway, I have like a whole list of those things. But
Hmm.
what I've found in terms of like how do I get better and what do I need to focus on, it has this year has become it's a people exercise. It's really about just like being there for our people. And unfortunately, we're all humans and people don't always get along. So it's like managing through conflict, in many steps, and also with I would say, the younger generations, unlike me, who grew up just like getting your head kicked in and your teeth kicked in and just like do the work. It's like everyone cares about their title. I find, see, people are like really super locked in about their comp, like in a more obsessive way
Hmm.
than I have ever been, like as a professional. As a banker, I've kinda got a year-end bankers, like, they get a year-end bonus, and so they crush all year, and then they sort of worry, like, the last few weeks of the year, they're like, "Alright, what's my bonus gonna be?" Right?
Yeah.
And I hope I don't get screwed, and so I just think, like, title conversations, comp conversations, and just overall people management, um, maybe it's just the kind of business that we run, but that's an area where, we're having to spend a lot of time. That's me. That's like 70%. Um, well, that's 50. And then 25% is all the goal setting, et cetera, and just trying to drive toward the goals. And then the last 25% is really finance and accounting and admin and all that. It's just
Yeah.
like when you get to our size, it's like, holy shit, like what should our org structure look like? Or, how do we really set up. You talked a lot about budgeting and planning. It's like, how do we really do this well? Those are the things that we're starting to talk about. And as a company our size, it's like we're working with, we just changed auditors. We're moving to
Yeah.
PwC, and it's like there's just a lot of this big boy stuff that, frankly, I've been at really big companies, but I wasn't in this level of, in the C-suite, where I had to see what was going on. So I'm constantly being educated on this. and it's really important.
Yeah. I think there's like simple frameworks for this too. So, and every company at every size, like as one of the leaders, whether you're president, CEO, COO, CMO, like anyway, you're a leader. There's sort of a, what does the company need you to do? Right. So like what has to be done. And, you know, you're when you're at the top of an organization, it sort of falls on you. There's the, what are you actually uniquely suited for? Right. So like Jason, what you're talking about, like you're a banker, you're suited to finance and legal and like operations and like these types of things. And then there's this third one, which I think a lot of people don't ever go to, which is what are the jobs that only you can do? And sometimes that comes down to like, it's a job to be done is like, you're the only person who can do it because that job requires a level of permission to move quickly. So like you're the only one who can like make a decision super quick without a lot of lag and slack and slow down in the organization. And then when you start to look at it through that framework, it's like, yeah, Jason, all year from my perspective, it's like you hired a lot of people this year. So it's like, it was a lot of leadership stuff this year for you. It's like, it's all the people dynamics and all this shit. And it's like, man, like I've led the biggest company I've led is about 130, 140 people. Yeah, it's a whole other dynamic, right? Like to what Mike is saying, like you're a different kind
I
of
would love to
CEO
get
now.
back into, I wish I could just be more focused on like the nuts and bolts of growing
Yeah.
our business, like the metrics. Because I feel like if I really were to dig into things like what is our media mix,
Yeah.
I could add value. But it's like at some point you just got to trust your team, and know that sometimes it's going to be good enough, even if you could
Well,
have
and
made it
somebody
a
else
little
can
better.
do that job. That's kind of what I'm getting at. It's like someone else can do that job, but they cannot then in turn do the job that you have to do now. Right? Whether it's capability or permission, there's just variables that are at play.
Yeah, one other thought that I gave a talk to my company on Tuesday of last week, and I talked about two things. I talked about two macro themes. One was tariffs, nationalism. One was technology, AI. And I kind of made the point of, hey, I want to frame this conversation. I'm not telling you that the technology is coming for all your jobs, but I am telling you it's coming, and I am telling you it's going to be super disruptive. And I think we should have the perspective going forward of we do not want to add anybody to the team unless they're bringing skill sets we don't already have. We don't want to be hiring more hours. And so one of the people on my team asked, like, well, why are you saying we don't want to hire more people? Like, and the way I explained it to them, if you've ever seen this on Twitter, it'll come up from time to time. It'll show the number of relationships in an organization.
Yeah.
So when we started the organization, there were 3 people, there were 3 relationships. At 10 people, there's like 55 relationships. At 100 people, it's like 6,000 relationships. It goes absolutely exponential. And one of the things you're describing, Jason, that does become frustrating as your organization gets bigger is that a significant amount of the work of the organization is maintaining the people in the organization.
Yep.
And it can become frustrating because you feel like, man, I'm having to spend a lot of capacity and work just kind of keeping the people side of this working harmoniously. And that has nothing to do with the selling of pots and pans. I do think this is one of the ways that technology will be disruptive and ultimately in a positive and productive way is that every time you add another person to your organization, it gets less effective because of just the entropy that comes with large groups of people. And so the tighter you can keep the organization, the more that as a leader you can be involved, you have more capacity to be involved in what your people are doing, and even just making yourself available to talk through things with people. Sometimes I get frustrated, not because I'm like, I want to make that decision, but because I know my people would love to like learn from me in an area or would love to discuss something, but I don't feel like I have the time because I've got to do X, Y, and Z instead. And so I do think that's coming. I think that people are going to want to run lean organizations, even for non-financial reasons, just operational reasons.
I think we should call it on that because we're going to get into 2020. I think we're going to get into 2025 stuff.
Yeah, let's do it.
Next
Matt,
time.
I just want to say one thing, and I know you need to drop, so if you need to go, don't worry about it. You can hear it later, okay? I just wanted to, I really want to thank Fulfill, Northbeam, and Postscript for just being great partners to both the operators pod and to Hexclad, because they're all really excellent partners to both. And I really want to thank you guys, Sean, who's not on, Matt, Mike. It's really an honor to do this with you guys, and I'm really grateful that for some reason you think I'm worth hanging out with and talking to.
Well,
And and the team behind the podcast, like there are a few people who actually do a bunch of work behind this to get it ready, and awesome team. And finally, I want to thank everyone who listens to this thing every week. I think we can all agree it's become a lot bigger than we ever expected. I think we had some hope that it could be really good based on the genesis with the Big Dog Chat and how valuable the Big Dog Chat was, and the ability to almost open source this to everyone. So I just want to say it's been a freaking awesome year. I love you guys, and I'm looking forward to a monster 2025 for all of our brands and the operators.
hell yeah,
And
man.
I couldn't echo that more. I've really grown a tremendous amount from spending more time with the both of you. And Sean, you mentioned Finn and the work he's done in producing the show. We've had people that believed in sponsoring the pod, and I think it's one of those special situations where I think everybody associated with the pod, from the listeners to the producers to us, has gotten a lot of value out of it, and it's helped us to grow. And hopefully that's the story of the pod, is that because this podcast exists, that all of us are better operators, that the people listening to it are better operators, that the employees that they're leading have a better experiences, that businesses are better. This is good for society. So anyway, I believe in what we've done here. I've really been honored to be a part of it with you. I think when we started, I don't think I would have anticipated. I think this is episode 88. I don't know that I would have anticipated that I would be as excited as I am 88 episodes in. And it's also interesting to me that, like, no matter how many things we've talked about today, we talked about really some subjects we'd never talked about before. And in some ways that just shows how much there is to leading and operating a business. There's so much surface area. It's so hard. It's so complicated. And like when I go places, I mean, whether this is Twitter DMs or when I go to a conference or something, I just have to say our community has been incredibly supportive and encouraging, and want to echo the thankfulness for that that Jason expressed. It's
yeah.
really been a positive in my life.
Hell yeah. Hard to add to that. It's been a year.
All right, boys.
Okay.
Thanks.
Happy
Talk soon.
New Year.
Yeah, baby.
We'll see you on the other side.
Yeah.
You made it. An amazing episode of the Operators Podcast. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing to the newsletter. Thank you to Fulfill, the best sponsor on earth. Northbeam, Postscript. They're tied for 2 of the best sponsors on earth. Love them. Love what they do for us. Thank you for being here. Subscribe, like, share. Follow me on Twitter. Follow the other guys on Twitter. Talk to you later. Goodbye.